Welcome to the Females Across the Pond and Beyond podcast. Hi, I'm Clara.
Hi, I'm Angie. We're here to share all things email and beyond. We go through the trials and tribulations of running your own business, being your own boss, and sending your own email marketing.
As email marketing experts, we're dedicated to helping small businesses thrive so they can have more freedom in their business.
Ready to get started? Let's dive into the episode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. So we are going to be talking about email marketing for service-based providers. Welcome to the episode. How are you doing, Angie?
Oh my gosh. I don't know what's in the air, but I'm definitely struggling a little bit with burnout. And we kind of were just talking about this. So we thought it might be a good idea to actually bring this online because as a business owner, I'm sure you can relate, those who are listening, um, with straddling the line between, what's too much work and how do we handle it, but also how do we make sure that we have consistent revenue, sales coming in. When like for us, like for me, I'm like in the process of hiring like a VA to help take off some tasks, but I'm not quite there yet. But the work is like coming in and I don't want to say no to the work, but I also want to make sure that like I have time for the work and can put the time and energy that every project deserves to have, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of
Uh,
like what I'm dealing with right now.
I completely relate. I think it's really hard to know, especially when all these really cool projects come up and you want to say yes to everything, but
Hmm.
then you kind of think, oh God, how am I going to do it all? And how can I give the best quality service and standards to each client? And
Yeah.
I mean, we would love to know if this resonates with you and if this is something you'd like us to do a podcast episode on, because between Angie and I, we certainly experienced this where, it it's kind of where is that line between having a really successful business but not being burnt out? It's kind of, how do you know you've reached it? How do you
Yeah.
scale your business as well without working crazy hours?
And then I think one thing that is also tough is when you do realize, hey, I can take on more help. I can pay someone to take on these tasks. With that, then I'm adding more hours to my workload in order to train them. So I also have to have the time then to like kind of do extra work in a time where you're trying to not have so much work to do. So it's like also, when do you know it's the right time to bring on someone? Like, should I have done this months ago when I was just
Mm.
like, maybe not so swamped, but then also didn't know if I was going to have the revenue coming in, like if the sales were actually going to show up. So
Oh,
I think that's
massively.
another discussion I'd love to have is like, when do you know it's time to bring on? Like, do you bring on before it gets chaotic or like, is that even possible,
Yeah, it's kind of tricky, isn't it? It's like chicken and egg because you don't want to invest in someone and training them up when you don't have the work to give them. But at the
Yeah,
same time, it's if it's a quiet period for you, it makes sense to start thinking about preparing for those big periods because
right.
suddenly you're in it and you're panicking and you've hired someone that may be a really bad fit for your business. And before you know it, you're doing the work yourself because it wasn't good enough. There are
And
so
that's,
many, well, I mean, there
yeah,
are so many errors that can be fallen into and made as business owners. And I'm sure that, you know, the listeners on this podcast can relate to some of these. This is real. This is what we're experiencing as small business owners, the decisions we have to make, right?
yeah. And I think it is very real that, you're going to hire people who aren't going to be a right fit, who it's not going to work out. And I think that's one thing that always kind of scares me in hiring someone because I'm just like, I'm totally up to training someone, totally up to bringing someone along. But there's always already been a few times where I've invested that time, I've invested that money, and then it's like it's not the right fit. So then I'm like, well, obviously I'm not doing a good job of vetting these people, and now I feel like I have to like, I don't know, do more rounds of interviews or like, more tests and things like that. And then that also kind of overwhelms me.
It is overwhelming, and I've had some shockers. And one day this will go into my also biography of some of the characters that have appeared
Oh
in my
yeah, some of
life.
your stories are like, what? I can't believe people do that. I don't want to scare people, but I'm sure we all have
Yeah,
our stories. But yeah,
yeah, there's been some shockers, and I mean, at the time, I didn't feel like laughing, but there will be a time where you can look back and laugh. And I think it is all part of the kind of journey of being a business owner that these
hmm
things, making decisions, making the wrong decisions will happen. And especially when you need help and it's hiring that help and figuring out who is important, who will be the right fit for your business. And yeah, I mean, there's so many stories we could share. So do let us know, drop us an
yeah,
email. Um, Let us know if this is something you'd like to hear more about because yeah, we know how it feels and we can absolutely resonate. So yeah, get in touch.
yeah. And
Um,
since this is a service provider episode, so I know that we're all service providers hanging out here right now. So
we certainly are, and that's the topic of today's podcast episode. So in our last episode, we looked at e-commerce within email marketing and how that all works. So if you are an e-commerce business, do check out that episode. We'll put a link in the show notes. But for all you service providers out there, this one is for you. So we will be looking at the basics of email marketing. We'll be looking at building your list and then how to craft an engaging message and the follow-up. So we'll be stepping you through our thoughts, guidance and tips on this today. Um, but really, why is email marketing important for service-based providers? Well, it's an incredible way to build client relationships and to grow your business. So exactly as it would be for an e-commerce business, even more so for service-based businesses where it is all about that human connection and human interaction with a service provider. So email marketing, if it isn't already in your marketing toolkit, it needs to be because it's such a big opportunity for you to build the relationship over time with your audience. Um, so let's just step through some of the basics then for um, email marketing for service-based providers and how it's different to product e-commerce type businesses. So do you want to take a stab at that one, Angie? What are the
of
differences
course.
between product and service-based businesses?
Well, I think the main difference is typically, when you're sending emails as a service provider, you're sending them from yourself, right? Whereas, like with e commerce, you're typically sending emails as a brand, and it's more branded and it's more around, the company. And I think, for service providers, it's much more personal. And I think ultimately that's a really good thing, but it can also feel a little bit intimidating, to be writing emails that you're like, I'm putting my name on these and sending these to, who knows. And then I also think, one of the main differences that I see is that, when we send emails as service providers, at least the service providers in my sphere, like I don't get a lot of engagement. I don't get as many clicks. And so they're comparing themselves to the stats that they're seeing from e-commerce brands. And I think that's one of an also big difference is that you might not be getting, as many clicks on your stuff. I mean, you can, and we'll talk about how you can, but I think that's also true too, because we send a lot of nurture emails, a lot of tip emails, a lot of how to, which I think is good. But I think it can also feel like, is anyone listening to me if no one's like clicking on these? And that's another thing that I hear from service providers a lot. What about you?
Yeah, I think the main thing to remember with service-based providers and email marketing is that you've got this wonderful opportunity to storytell and
Yeah.
um, really share, why you've set up your business. Of course, you do for e-commerce, but with service-based providers, there's usually more of a connection in a sense that it's either a solopreneur or a face um, that fronts the business. And people want to know your story. How did you arrive at starting this business? Why did you set up the business? What's the mission of the business? And this can be a great way to talk about, a lot of the whys and hows of your business and actually bring people on a journey with you through your email marketing. So, and also I guess to get kind of more into the um, some of the differences with e-commerce type businesses is that the calls to action on a service-based provider's email is usually more linked to getting them on a call with you or coming to a webinar or an event. E-commerce tends to be straight to the product, right? Usually it's a new product release or um, a set of products that someone wants to sell. It's kind of fairly straightforward, straight to the website. With service-based providers, it feels like, or it certainly is in my experience, there's a lot of different things to offer in the types of interactions you can have with your clients, with your audience. So I think there's certainly a lot to offer as a service-based provider. Don't ever feel that, you can't offer any kind of interesting content in your email marketing because there's tons of stuff you can do. Um, but
Yeah.
really, yeah, I mean, there's so much. I mean, we'll go through it today in our session, but really, I guess the first question we would ask you as service-based providers is, what is your goal?
Hmm.
So, what are you looking to achieve through your emails? Are you looking to increase your brand awareness? Are you a new business? Therefore, you're establishing yourself. Are you looking to get new clients? Are you looking to retain your existing clients and get repeat business? Always go back to what is the goal of your email marketing? What is the specific goal for a particular campaign or a flow? Because that will really help you determine the content. Would
Yeah,
you
I think
agree, Angie?
yeah, I think to touch on, one of the main differences that you discussed is that the sales funnel can be a little bit longer in terms of like the time it takes someone to get to know you, to like you, to trust you. And I think that's could be mainly because the prices are higher. The investment is a little bit higher, with service providers. When someone's investing in me and my services, you know, yes, they're going to take a little bit more time to think about it, because my price tag's a little bit different than like an e-commerce product, that's like $20 and like, I can just click this and I can just buy it and it's quick, you know? So
Mhm.
I think you're absolutely right in establishing goals. And then in those goals, mapping out that sales funnel, mapping out how you want, people to move through that sales funnel with you to, like I said, get to know you, like you, trust you, understand what your services are, understand how you help them. And that's the stuff that people need to hear in order to book with you. So it is really important to kind of have an overarching, yeah, I guess, timeline, whether that's with flows or your campaigns, so that okay, this is where this person is, and this is how I'm bringing them along to book a call with me. And just know it might take, a month, 2 months, whatever it is, depending on also what else you're doing on your other uh, social media channels or wherever else you're showing up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really valid point, Angie, that, it can take a while, especially if you're a high ticket service provider and your offering is something new to your audience. It takes time to build that trust and establish that rapport. However, um, if you have an existing audience and you're going back with looking for repeat business by driving, additional offers, you might have a special offer that's for a limited time only for your audience, then that's going to do really well. If if your audience, if it resonates with your audience. So just get really clear on what is it you want to
Hmm.
do. Is it that you're running an event? Is it that you want
Hmm.
to fill a masterclass? Is it that
Hmm.
you're launching a course or a membership or a podcast even? Think about what is it, what's the intention behind your email marketing? What do you want to, what goals you want to achieve? Um, and that kind
Yeah.
of leads us and that kind of leads us really well into building your list. And Angie, I don't know if you want to share any thoughts on this and the difference between, like, like one of the things I guess it would be good to raise with you, Angie, is, and I get asked this all the time, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, is as a service-based provider, do I need a huge list to make
Ugh,
money from email?
no, no, heck no. I say this kind of all the time and I'm no shame, but last year I had 50 people on my email list, 50 people, and I still made a few $1,000s from that email list. And I think it's just because I was consistent. Like I just consistently emailed them. Honestly, I'm going to be super honest. I wasn't even sure that I was going to be able to make sales from my email list. But as an email marketer, with 50 people, because it is harder, the less people you have to choose from, it can feel like, oh man, there's not a lot of people on here. So I don't even know how much of a chance I have in making a sale. But as an email marketer, I knew, no, I have to push through that block because I absolutely can make sales from these people. They joined my email list for a reason. There's 50 of them. If I had 50 people, coming to me one day, like to ask me about my services, I would hope I could make a sale,
Yeah.
and I absolutely did. So I feel like, and some of those people were just past clients, a handful of them were just past clients, which, like you kind of just mentioned, is kind of an easy way to make some sales if you need to in a jiffy. So yeah, you don't need with service providers, you absolutely do not need the size list that you might be more important for e-commerce business owners.
Yeah, e-commerce businesses, you do need the volume. If you
Hmm.
think the kind of average conversion rate is 2.5%, work out then on your audience size, your email list, how many people you'll get from that in order to fulfill your course, for example. Um, your what I say to clients as well, because a lot of people ask me that question, how do I need thousands of people? And I say it's all about quality when it comes to service-based providers. I think if you were to have a small but very engaged list, so by engaged, I mean they're opening emails, they're reading emails, they're even contacting you, and you're getting higher than a 2.5% click rate, then you will make money from that email list because you're doing everything right in nurturing them to this point. So I wouldn't get hung up on having a small list. Having said that, it's always good to continue to grow your list because
Oh yeah.
people fall off your list all the time in a sense that, let's say people want to join your course, they do your course, they get what they need. They're kind of, for now, they basically need to just then think, well, I've got what I need, so I'm not going to buy anything more for now. So it may be that then they become disengaged because um, they've got what they need. So you've got to think about the stage that someone is at in the journey with you. Um, are they new to your list, or are they someone that is still interested in buying from you a second time or a third time? Um, Regardless of all of that, you need to be growing your list. No matter, you could you could have a huge list, but it's highly unengaged, and people are not engaging with you as a brand. So therefore, the size of your list doesn't necessarily indicate the quality, is what we want to say. Um, and the usual kind of things apply around GDPR, right? In exactly the same way as it did for the e-commerce podcast episode, that just make sure that you're being really transparent about what you're doing with the data.
Hmm.
Um, you're collecting consent in the right way. It amazes me, Angie, that there's still people out there collecting consent through like a Google sheet or like, just
What?
random ways, that doesn't, I kind of think, how are you even doing this? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Use a platform, use a CRM, use an ESP platform, any platform, just make sure
There's
you're
so many free
collecting consent.
ones. There's
Yeah.
so many free ones. Keep everything. It'll be so much easier for you to manage too.
Yeah. So yeah, really think about how you're collecting data, growing your list, um, and then also keeping your list healthy. If there are people that haven't clicked on your emails in like 6 to 12 months, depending on your, um, the kind of services you offer, then you might want to think about either sending them a win back campaign or removing them. Um, we do touch on this in another episode on unsubscribes.
Yeah.
Um, but really, this is just about keeping a healthy list, right?
Oh, yeah. It's so important to, keep people engaged and then to also respect people who are, quite frankly, telling you that they're not interested if they're not opening your emails. So, I mean, yeah, it really does depend on the life cycle of, your clients too. Again, with service-based providers, because things take a little bit longer, you might just like put them in an unengaged segment and exclude them from your normal sends and maybe once in a while, but I would definitely try to win them back and also just maybe try to get some information from them. Send them a survey, that's like, what are you interested in hearing about, or where are you in your business? That could also be helpful too if you have a pool of people who are unengaged and you're trying to understand why.
Yeah, I love, and this might kind of be more relevant to the next section that we're talking about, but I
Mm,
really love Brennan Dunn's, he talked about putting in your email. And I've tried this a couple of times and it's worked. So I always get responses, which is, if I could dedicate my next newsletter to you, what would it be about? And
yeah.
I always get responses. It's such a great question.
Hmm.
So that could be an easy thing to do as a service provider, is to put that question in your next email. Um, but let's talk about crafting a message now, and how to drive that engagement as a service-based provider. Um, so again, it's really about understanding your audience. So who is it you're speaking to? Have you got any kind of segmentation set up? Now, if you've got a really small list, I wouldn't bother with segmentation unless it's really obvious. For example, let's say of the 50 people that have joined your list, 40 of them came through an event that you attended, or delivered a presentation at. You could tag those people as the event name so that in the future that those people came through to you via this event. If you don't know, and people are just literally signing up through maybe your lead magnet, or they're just seeing your great content online, don't get too caught up on segmentation with a small list at this point.
Yeah.
What's more important is that you're emailing them. And what to write about as a service-based provider is, well, we want to hear from you about your expertise. If I sign up to hear from someone, I'm curious to know more. I want to know more about what they do and how they can help me. So think about your testimonials, think about case studies where you've helped other people, um, industry updates, tips and guidance. What else, Angie, could people talk about as a service provider?
Yeah, I feel like as service providers, like we have so much content that we can send through emails. And I think it's important to remember that it doesn't have to be advanced. It doesn't have to be intermediate. You don't have to like wow them every time. I think something that I'm even understanding more about my audience, like as I've done more webinars and like just talk to people more, is that a lot of people that come into my sphere are more so beginners and are more so, needing kind of the basics and like the foundational stuff. And I think that there's so much power in keeping it simple and, just, being honest or and in that vein. So, when it comes to like tips or like industry insights and things like that, I think like maybe I'm speaking for myself. I can honestly be like, oh my gosh, I gotta like do this like big thing, or it has to be amazing. No, it could be really simple where it's like, this is what a nurture email is, and this is what a sales email is, and this is when you send one, and this is when you send the other, and that's it. And keeping it
Mhm.
really simple for people to understand, digest. And if they can just take one little thing from you, you know, and be like, oh, okay, that's going to have a big impact on, how they think and making them want to open your emails in the future too, knowing that, okay, I'm just going to get these little tips and, it's going to help me. And, so anything, yeah, as far as content goes, of course, tips, advice, your insights in the industry, and like you mentioned, like how you got started, what are those feel good stories that, or how you're helping your clients, and or the struggles that you are going through that maybe your clients are also going through, or just the struggles that your past clients have gone through and you want to offer a little bit of advice. I think people really appreciate like kind of, that human, that one-to-one vulnerability and talking about, what's really going on behind the scenes because we're all business owners, right?
We absolutely are. And, we touched on storytelling earlier, and
Yeah.
it's it's just so important to share that story. Um, there's this whole discussion about how much vulnerability to share through, marketing. And I think it's really a personal choice as to how much you want to share
Yes.
and how appropriate it is, and actually how it can help others. So we don't mean just, share something for the sake of it. It's actually thinking about and going back to that goal, like what is it, what is your goal with this email? Is it to ultimately get people to sign up to your course? So then what would be the benefit of sharing that story? Is it to inspire them? Is it to motivate them to think about how they'd like change in their life? So think about the role of storytelling and it what you want it to lead to in terms of action from your audience. Um, and then also think about the replies and the interaction as well. We want to hear, the great thing about email is we can see people clicking, opening, we can see what they're doing, but we also want to encourage people to respond to us. And it's just that really nice feedback when you're sending an email out to your audience, you get someone reply. I had that actually a few weeks ago. I had someone reply to me on an email to say, I absolutely love this email. I think I'd created some kind of how-to video content. And that comment alone just was like fantastic, because sometimes you don't get that. You just send
Yeah.
things out, you get the results, but you don't necessarily get that human response. So it's
Yeah.
nice. And I would highly encourage it if you're a service provider to just encourage people to reach out to you, right? Like,
Yeah.
we want to hear from you.
Yeah. Tell people to reply to you, tell people to you ask them what their thoughts are, or what their experiences are. I mean, you can again get more specific and be like, I want to hear it have you experienced this? What was your experience? Reply and tell me. Because yeah, and you can just also gain so much information on the people who are reading your emails in that way, because at the end of the day, we want to be sending them content that, does help them and does connect with them. And the only way that we're going to know what content that is if we engage with them and we have conversations with them. And we absolutely can do that through our email marketing.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's just that human connection that we want as
Yeah.
business owners. Um, and then if we think about the kinds of emails that we can send, so we've talked about, you know, what content we recommend you send. But also don't feel that as a service provider, you have to send all of this manually. In fact, there's very little need to send much manually anymore in terms of email marketing. You've got your welcome sequences, which are all automated. You can set up automated reminders. You can set up follow-ups. So there's a lot you can automate in your business. That means it's working hard for you. I always think of like your email platform as another team member because it's doing a lot of legwork for you once you set everything up. So, for example, your welcome sequence, if someone downloads your lead magnet, your freebie, or they see you speak at an event, or they've come through to your website, a welcome sequence is that storytelling we talked about earlier, introducing your services, what you do and why. I also have this with some of my clients, I ask them to include 2 fun facts about themselves, and it's like a really nice way to show the different side of the business of the service provider in terms of like, you know, I wouldn't have expected, like there's been some really random answers to that question, to those questions, you know, 2 fun facts about yourself, and it can just really show the personality of the business owner. So think about how you can really put your stamp on those emails in terms of, you know, who are you as a person, not just a business owner. What else are you interested in outside of work? Like, who are you as a human being, as opposed to just a business owner? Because there's so much you can include, and the more personal you can get in terms of people getting to know you. Remember, this is all about know, like, trust. We want to get to know you. Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
We will buy from you if we like you and trust you. And that trust can take time to build up, right?
Yeah, it can. I think too, I want to say on the other hand, don't be afraid to put like a low ticket offer into your welcome sequence as well. Because there are going to be people who like download your freebie, and especially again, it's all in the planning, right? Like, what are you trying to do? So if you create a freebie that's like a few steps, but then they really get the full experience, maybe in your low ticket masterclass or whatever it is, or maybe like a PDF or whatever, then it would make sense to move them along that funnel. And, you know, as they get to know you, as they get to trust you, you also can be like, and by the way, I have this, you know, if you want to, because yes, it can take time for some people, but there are going to be those like one-off people that like they don't need it, especially if it's a lower ticket, then it might be a no-brainer for some people. So also don't be afraid to, you know, after you welcome them in a couple emails, to try to, you know, generate some passive income for yourself.
It's a really nice touch to do that. And not all of you will have um, a low price ticket offer, a low ticket offer. So what we mean by that is, let's say you've got a masterclass or some kind of webinar that you feel is of value. You can put that on a landing page that people can only access once they've paid for the low ticket price. So it could be like, I don't know, $7, $10. Um, it it's just about how to give them small amounts of value to build that trust. Because remember, they don't know you yet. They may have seen you on social media, but there's still a lot they don't know. And it can take time, especially if you've got higher priced offers. They're in that whole decision-making process of, do I want to work with this person? Do I like this person? I'm not going to buy a high priced offer if I don't like the person. Does what they are telling me resonate with me? Can they help me? These are
Mm-hmm.
all questions going through people's heads as they read your emails. Um, so we want to make sure we're answering those types of concerns, you know, any kind of maybe possible objections that people might have of you. You want to make sure you're kind of tackling those through your welcome sequence. And as service providers, really, most of you, and you know, it may not be for all of you, but most of you will have the the call to action will be to link people to booking a call with you, an initial discovery call of some kind, or it could be that you get them to apply to work with you. There's a number of different ways people can interact with you. But yeah, one of the ways to absolutely stand out is to share your story, your expertise, and you can absolutely do that through email marketing. And Angie, I wanted to ask you about the follow-up. Like, what's your opinion on following up with, let's say someone has reached out to you as a service provider? How can we nurture that follow-up?
Yeah, I think again, it kind of comes back to what are the questions that they have, or like how can you help them make a decision with you? I think, and it also really depends on how comfortable do you feel following up with them. Like if you haven't heard from them, like how often do you, email them or try to recapture them? Or maybe do you, give them a little bit more nurturing or give them a little taste of like your coaching or your offering if you have like a free video or something like that that can make them feel connected to you. How do you tackle follow-ups? I'm interested to hear.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So if someone has expressed interest in working with you, then the intent is there to work with
Yeah,
you.
it's kind of like an abandoned cart with e-commerce,
It
right? Like
really
they were
is.
almost there.
Yeah. And in fact, you can automate that to some extent, right?
Right.
If someone has not responded to you, let's say they followed up and then they've gone quiet. I mean, again, that's a whole podcast episode in itself. Um, but you can certainly be as helpful as possible. Send them
Yeah.
resources, send them links to your blog posts, podcast episodes, videos. Really, all you can do is if they've had a call with you and um, or maybe they're still unsure. The other thing you could do, which is really helpful at this stage, and this is something to think about, is what are the common objections that you get as a service provider? And I'll say now, from what I've learned, and from I'm sure Angie will say, it's not necessarily always about price. It's usually something else. Um, it
They're
might be that
usually not seeing the value or like they don't know the
exactly.
results,
Yeah,
right?
or like or your positioning of the service doesn't make sense to them, or
Right.
like there's something that's gone wrong in that whole kind of process. And your job as through the follow-up is to help them quickly get to an answer. So if there's like a misunderstanding or if they are unclear about your offering, then you want to quickly put that right. So think about like what are the common objections you typically get, and you could put that in your follow-up to in terms of the answers to those questions. Um, but it's very rarely to do with the price, and it's more to do with the value that they get from your offering or the positioning of the offer. So yeah, there's a lot of value in following up, but it's just about how, as a service provider, you are tackling those objections really early on and making it super clear for your potential client. Um, but as a service provider, I mean, it's a really exciting time to be starting your own business, to be running your own business. There's so much potential for email marketing, and I see so many people do really well through both our clients, but also beyond. People,
There's
can get real see absolute amazing success from building an email list and actually generating revenue from email. And we're always going to champion email, given that we're hugely biased. But remember, with social media and other platforms out there, they're not as robust. So as a service provider, you want to be thinking about how you can really start to take charge of your list and start to, make some real revenue from your audience. Is there anything else you want to add, Angie, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think like at the end of the day, email marketing is a sales channel for your business. That is the main thing that email marketing does is make the sale because it is the direct line of communication that you have with your subscribers. So just keep that in mind that we're talking, in the beginning of the episode where we talked about burnout, and taking on too much work. We also know what it's like to not have a lot of work and to be nervous about the work that we have, coming up down the pipeline. And if you can build your email list, you can absolutely go to that. as service providers, we tend to nurture a lot. We tend to send emails that are tips and advice, and so when we do have like those lulls in, the work that's coming, you absolutely can and should use your email list to make those sales and, turn your monthly revenue around for yourself. So that's what we want for you. We want it to be a dependable sales channel because we know it absolutely can.
100% totally agree with you. So just to wrap up then, we've talked about the difference between service providers and e-commerce businesses. We talked about the value of building your list. So if you have a small list, remember it is still quality over quantity, but never stop building your list because
Never
people
stop.
do fall. Never
Yeah.
stop. Never
And never
stop.
stop emailing your list.
Never stop emailing. And then also, we've given you some guidance around crafting your message. So what to talk about as a service provider, the role of storytelling, and how powerful automations can be for your business.
Yes.
And really, that kind of concludes the episode. So thank you so much for listening. If you have any feedback on today's episode or any questions, do drop us a note. We'd love to hear from you. And we'd also love to hear about any other topics you'd like to hear about. We are also business owners too. So we are planning to do some episodes on what it's like to run a business. So not specifically email marketing related, but also, the reality of running your own business and some of the things that happen behind the scenes. So we're looking to share some of those podcasts in the coming weeks. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you on any thoughts and feedback you might have for future episodes.
Yes.
In the meantime, thank you so much for listening.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. You've just listened to Females Across the Pond and Beyond podcast with your hosts, Clara and Angie. If you like our content, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on the platform of your choice. Is there something you want to hear about for our next episode? Email us at femalesacrossthepond@gmail.com to let us know. Until next time.